asked people this in interviews before, and they're like, I don't have a weakness. And I'm like, really? Well, then it must be self-awareness.
If someone's just also a practical tip, they come in and they're pretty nervous, what's a way to deal with that?
Research and practice. The more you practice and prepare ahead of an interview, the less nervous you'll be. So from a job seeker standpoint, if you're very, very crazy nervous, you just haven't done enough prep and you haven't practiced enough.
The hiring manager would ask the employee, what's their salary expectation?
A job interview is very important for you to understand your worth, get your mindset right, and know what you're willing to accept. You have to have a bare minimum, you have to have a hope and a dream, you have to have a range for yourself. And that's different for everybody.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, a podcast about growth, mindset, and entrepreneurship. I'm Moshe Popack, and today we chat with Anna Papalia about the science of job interviewing. Have you ever been perfect for a job but choked during the interview? Or maybe you didn't have great answers to tough questions like, what are your weaknesses? Anna is an expert in this space. She is the CEO and best-selling author of Interviewology and has keen insight on how to crush any job interview. She's advised more than 10,000 clients and is about to pass along her expertise to you. Enjoy. Hi, Anna, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So top of my mind, before the show, we were just talking about the idea of where we are as far as the employer-employee relationships and everything that's kind of mindset of what's going on, the undertone of what's going on in America since COVID. Where do you think we're actually going to go? Where is that equilibrium going to be in 6 months, a year, 2 years, and 5 years from now?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the idea of an equilibrium because I do believe that COVID shifted everything so far in a different direction. Almost 4 years ago, it was March 13th when everything shut down where I was. There were so many industries and so many companies that didn't do anything virtually, let alone job interviews, let alone full jobs. So we shifted in an entirely different way really fast. And so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are now working from home. And obviously, COVID was also this global near-death experience for so many people. And when you personally go through a near-death experience, even when you may not have had COVID, but you know other people that got sick, or just the trauma of what happened when we all had to shut down and start working differently, all of a sudden your priorities change. And so many people started looking at how they work, the way they work, their work-life balance differently. And that's going to take us some time to sort of right size or balance to bring us back to that equilibrium that you were talking about. And for the past year and a half, a lot of large corporations have been trying to get people to come back into the office. And if you're in real estate, you know that there's a crisis, right? We have so many office buildings that are empty. We have a real problem. And there are many reasons why large organizations want people to be back in the office. And then there are really a lot of reasons and competing reasons why employees don't want to go back to the office, whether it be they don't want to commute or they're a parent and they need to be home. And we have all of these conflicting issues. So I believe in the next year or 2 years, we are going to right size slightly. I don't think everyone's going back to the office, but I think a lot more people are going back to the office than they think. Will it ever be pre-2020? No. Once we've gotten a taste that we can do these things and be really productive virtually, I don't think we have to do it the old way, but we can't continue to have, 90% of people 100% virtual. A lot of things are lost when you're not in person. And so I think there's denial on both sides of the table. I think some CEOs think, why can't people all come back to the office? Well, there's some real reasons. And also people are very productive at home. And then there's the flip to that as well. So I think an equilibrium way of talking about it is a great way. We're going to come back to a bit of a balance in the next year and a half.
I've also seen and I think that this is also part of the ingredients of what's shaping. A lot of companies are going offshore or to other countries, outsourcing to other countries. That, and also what's going to happen with artificial intelligence. How that's a lot of topics of the conversation for employment base. Where do you see that in, again, 5-10 years from now?
Well, with every great technology, there's this fear that it's going to take our jobs. But what it generally does is it just forces these lower level jobs to innovate or change or evolve, and then other positions crop up, right? For example, you can't hire a computer to go into a job interview for you because no AI program knows your story. You know, some people can pop in interview questions to AI and get the perfect interview answers, or hiring managers can ask these types of things, but nothing replaces this human interaction when you're telling your story and you're selling yourself. And there are lots of jobs and lots of careers where AI won't be able to take over for quite some time if it ever does.
So talking about interviews, because I wasn't great at interviewing, whether when I was seeking a job or when I was interviewing somebody else. I don't know, my wife says I have like pink glasses and it's hard for me to see past. I always like kind of look at things a certain way. But what would you say, let's just say someone comes in, because I think that people have a tendency the first 3 seconds to have like a perspective. Those first 3 seconds, and I am searching for a job, how can you project a confidence or that someone has a likability? How can you do that?
Well, first and foremost, I think that there's a lot of really bad interviewing advice out there. And I think for the most part, for years and years, it was predicated on this idea that there is this one thing that you could do, or that you could memorize the perfect answers or just mirror the person's body language and you'll get the job. I always say, if you follow me on social, or for anyone listening that does, they know I say this all the time. An interview is a set of questions about you. The more you know yourself, the better you'll do. And I taught interview skills at the college level for over 12 years. And what I realized is my college students and all of my clients who were really great at interviewing had mastered self-awareness. They knew who they were. So I think that's the first and foremost, the most important thing that you can do as a hiring manager or a job seeker is to really understand what you prioritize. So for me, I collected lots of research. I wrote a personality assessment and I discovered interview styles. So everyone interviews as a charmer, challenger, examiner, or harmonizer. And I think it's really important that you build up your self-awareness and know these things about yourself ahead of a job interview.
Anna, can you tell us a little bit more about those 4 styles?
Of course. So the 4 styles are charmers, challengers, examiners, and harmonizers. And if I had to quickly explain each one, charmers look at interviews like a performance, like they're the star of the show, and they prioritize being liked. They want to be liked in an interview as either a job seeker or a hiring manager. And then we have challengers. Challengers want to be respected and heard. They look at an interview like a cross-examination. They're highly skeptical and they're going to figure something out. Then we have examiners. Examiners are more private. They're quiet. They look at an interview like a test that they are either going to pass or fail. They go into an interview wanting to be seen as qualified, which is much different than their opposite, the charmer, who wants to be liked. And then lastly, harmonizers. Harmonizers look at an interview like a tryout for a team that they want to join. They want to adapt. They're warm. They're collaborative. And they often have problems saying the words I and me, owning their successes. They talk about the collective. They talk about the team. And you can see how that's much different than their opposite, the challenger, who wants to be respected and heard and put a stake in the ground, where harmonizers are like, more about the collective and who we are as a group. And there is a normal distribution in our data. So we have just as many charmers, challengers, examiners, and harmonizers. And not all realtors are charmers and not all accountants are examiners. There is an equal distribution in all of these roles and all of these functions. So it's less about these stereotypes and our biases and more about being open-minded that we can have this style in an interview, and it really doesn't predict whether or not you're going to be good at the job. It's just about how you interview. Because imagine a job interview is this artificial event where someone has something that you want, a job or a promotion. What do? Do you turn up the volume? Do you become charming? Or do you want to show them that you're qualified? And there's something that happens to us in that moment. So that's what my interview style assesses. And my book goes into great detail of each style, their strengths, overused strengths, and things that you can do to improve.
How would, I know there's a lot of talk in many different areas about self-awareness. I think, as, running the real estate company that we do, I think that that's also top of mind. I'm constantly journaling, writing, analyzing self. Is there some tools, if someone is beginning and they hear about self-awareness all the time, what are practical tools that people can do to become more self-aware?
So obviously I'm slightly biased to the personality assessment that I wrote in the tool that I created for job seekers and hiring managers. But there are lots of ways that you can get to self-awareness. You can hire a coach. You can talk to your friends and family, husband, wife. They usually have some pretty good insight, right? Or a lot of people like StrengthsFinder or DISC or love languages. I know there's a big, cult following for Myers-Briggs, but that's actually not based on science at all. So be slightly picky about the tools that you choose and the friends or mentors you recruit to give you that advice. But those are all great ways to master some self-awareness.
And are there just no-nos, like basically things that people shouldn't say in interviews across the boards, or kind of will turn the employer off completely?
Oh, well, how much time do we have? So there are things that you should absolutely not ask as a hiring manager. And then there are things, obviously, you should not talk about as a job seeker. So let's start with hiring managers, because this can be a pervasive problem because 90% of hiring managers are never trained to interview. And I think it's well known, but it's not well practiced that you are not supposed to ask personal questions in a job interview. You're not supposed to ask someone where they live, who they're married to, are they married, what does your husband do, do you have children, anything about your religion. There's a whole list from the EEOC that if you do a lot of hiring, you should familiarize yourself with. Because in my experience, most of the time, hiring managers ask these questions in the small talk portion of the interview. And they're just making chit chat. Oh, did you have any problems finding us today? How was the traffic? Oh, you live in Fort Washington? Oh, so does my sister. And then it starts. Oh, where do you live? How many kids do you have? What does your husband do? Those are all things that should never be asked in an interview because it has nothing to do with whether or not this person is qualified for the job, and it leads to a lot of bias. In terms of job seekers, well, you should never give this information. If they don't ask, you should never volunteer that your husband is a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, because it doesn't matter. You should not talk about your children in a job interview. And you should also not bring up some sensitive subjects about the company unless they bring them up. Or in my estimation, if you've been vetted and you know what the range is, you shouldn't be digging into salary or, what will my PTO be or how quickly can I take my first vacation? Don't ask any of those. Build the relationship first, get to the offer, and then you can start talking about, then you negotiate salary.
I know there's also a lot of talk about kind of like that vulnerability and that honesty. So I find, I don't know, again, maybe it's just something that I might appreciate, but now hearing, when someone opens up about a personal situation that they're dealing with, even if it's in the interview setting, I feel that this person, they're not a robot. They're more personal and they can be more transparent, and that would bode well in a team setting, in the type of company that I would like to be around, like where everybody's just honest and truthful. But I definitely understand on the EEOC issue as well.
Of course, we don't want to hire robots, and the advice is to not, open up. It's to open up carefully, right? You have to remember as a hiring manager or as a job seeker, This is a job interview. It's not a date. And some hiring managers have to manage their expectations around what they want from candidates and vice versa, because it's more about testing the candidate to see if they'll have the technical aptitude to do the job rather than, do I just like them? Are they going to fit in? Because that's where we know where bias creeps in. And it's hard. It's really hard in an interview to kind of put that stuff aside because we're used to building relationships and getting to know people by sharing stories about our kids and our husband and our family. But that's not appropriate in a job interview.
And if someone's just also a practical tip, they come in and they're pretty nervous. What's a way to deal with that?
Well, I spend a lot of time coaching clients on how to prepare for job interviews. And I have a huge social media platform with over 2 million followers where I give free tips all the time. And some of my most common tips, people tell me all the time that they're very nervous. And I always say, practice. Research and practice. The more you practice and prepare ahead of an interview, the less nervous you'll be. So from a job seeker standpoint, if you're very, very crazy nervous, you just haven't done enough prep and you haven't practiced enough. From a hiring manager standpoint, I've been in this situation thousands of times where I've had candidates come in so nervous that they can barely speak. It doesn't really serve you. You don't get anything great out of a candidate if you make them more nervous. So it's really important to set the scene, take a deep breath, start with some small talk that's appropriate, offer them some water or coffee, just get them, to calm down a little bit. There is this harshness, leniency thing in interviewing where some people want to be good cop, bad cop, and they just want to really torture people in interviews. But for the most part, that's only 20% of hiring managers. Most hiring managers, they understand. It's an occupational hazard when you interview people. You know that people are going to be extremely nervous most of the time.
That's interesting. And what would you say if you were asked, as a potential employee, and I know this is asked all the time. So they ask what the strengths are, but they also ask what are your weaknesses. So how do you respond to that? That's always a tough question.
So I do lots of videos on this. When you're asked in an interview, when they say, what's your weakness? How do you respond? Well, number one, it has to be truthful. Don't make up some bullshit answer. That's, recruiters have great bullshit detectors. So don't even try to do that. Don't come up with some fake answer. If you Google this, a lot of things will say you're a perfectionist. Please don't, because you're probably not. So it's about thinking deeply, having that self-awareness we talked about, and figuring out what that weakness is. And then how do you talk about it in an interview is how you talk about how you know this about yourself, maybe a micro story of how you found this out about yourself and how you're working on it. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for people that understand what they're working on. The worst thing, I asked people this in interviews before, and they're like, I don't have a weakness. And I'm like, really? Well, then it must be self-awareness. Because everyone has a weakness, right? If you tell me you don't have a weakness, that's a major red flag. So for example, I give this example a lot on social media. If I were asked this in an interview, I might say I'm highly impatient. One of my strengths is that I'm type A and I get everything done. I get everything done on time. I'm never going to be late. I'm extremely goal-oriented. But the overused aspect of that becomes a weakness is that I can be incredibly impatient, which makes me a little hard to live with and work with. And I'm learning that some of the best things in life take time. And I am constantly reminding myself of that.
It's funny, I just did a test. It had me, it was like a Winnie the Pooh test that a friend of mine showed me. It was like ADD, ADHD, autism, and OCD. So it has me also type A, OCD max. But also, I had also a major part ADHD. So I'm bouncing between the two. And again, I don't know how science-based the study was, but to your point, I'm also constantly thinking about patience. That's my weakness, and I'm constantly that's an interesting point. Because the world revolves around being patient too, right?
And it's also really important in an interview that you're talking about a weakness that can be construed as a strength. So when you test your interview answers, think to yourself, what would a hiring manager think? Hiring managers they love to hear that you're impatient, right? They're like, yes, great. Or that you can't delegate, or, that you have a hard time saying no. Like, that's a wonderful weakness to give in an interview, right? Because they're like, yes, great. Just give them all the work. So that's the test that you would ask yourself. Is it true? Is it real to my experience? And would a hiring manager be impressed by this answer?
And is there, from the employee that's being interviewed, are there certain questions that look good that the employee can ask the hiring manager?
Yeah, so I have tons of these videos like pinned to the top of my TikTok page and Facebook. I do, 3 of the most impressive or smart questions to ask at the end of an interview or throughout an interview. They're wonderful questions to ask, but you should certainly figure out who you're talking with. So HR people know HR stuff and hiring managers know the technical day-to-day. So you should ask them questions that they know the answers to. So for example, if you're in a phone screen, which is an initial interview with an HR person, you could ask them what are the next steps of the interview process, or questions about company culture or about the company in general, because that's what they know about. And when it comes to the technical hiring manager, you can ask them, what projects are you currently working on that I could help you with? Something came up recently. Someone asked me at the end of an interview, should I say, do you have any reservations about hiring me? Like, no. Why on earth would you ask that at the end of an interview? You don't want to leave them with a negative. You don't want to get them thinking about why they don't want to hire you, right? And they're not going to be honest with you. Like, they're not. So instead, ask better questions or reiterate your interest and passion for the position.
And obviously, there's always that question, right? That's the whole idea in business, right? The hiring manager would ask the employee, what's their salary expectation? So, right? So how do you answer that, right? So it's like this, I find that to be a tougher question, how it's answered.
Well, you have to be prepared.
Right.
You have to be prepared. So many people comment on my videos or send me messages or emails. I get thousands of messages every day. How do I answer this? I'm like, well, I don't know you. I don't know what you're expecting to make. I don't know your career. I don't know your level of experience. And it's different for everyone. And a job interview is very important for you to understand your worth, get your mindset right, and know what you're willing to accept. You have to have a bare minimum. You have to have a hope and a dream. You have to have a range for yourself. And that's different for everybody.
Yeah, it's super interesting. The obviously now with all the past bunch of years with social media, should we expect hiring managers are checking out our social media, are Googling us, all of that? I assume that's open, to garner whether someone's going to hire you or not, I assume.
Of course. I mean, if you were about to hire somebody, wouldn't you do a quick Google search on them?
I definitely would. It's so interesting with the youth. They're just, coming into as they come into the job, experience, it seems that they're in the high school years, they're just posting whatever it happens to be and not thinking about the future. That seems to be an issue a little bit, I would think.
Well, they use it differently than we do. They're natives when it comes to, social media and having grown up with it. So what they put on there it's different for them, right? And that will change as the generations go through the workforce. What's appropriate to put online is much different if you're 60 or if you're 18 or 15. I did career day at my son's school today. I spoke to 2 third grade classes, and I was shocked that half of all of the third graders have phones and TikTok. My son does not have a phone or an iPad. I was so surprised. So even third graders are on social media, apparently.
The shock that came to me yesterday, my son was watching one of the YouTube influencers, and there was an ad for Tinder, of all things. Right, my son's 8 years old, right, and I was like, that parents should be aware of. That's not good. That's not a good thing. Right, and we know, there's not too much regulation with all the social media. That's the fact, right? So we have to, it's just as parents look into that. That's super important.
Yeah, for sure. YouTube is a crazy rabbit hole. I also have an 8-year-old, and he gets watching stuff, and it's, produced by these 15 to 20-year-old guys, but, they're not putting any age restrictions on it. And then the advertising on YouTube puts stuff like Tinder and things like that. So it's really problematic for parents and problematic for corporations as well. I mean, I've worked with organizations who had interns that were making inappropriate posts about their internship and about work because they just think, I'm just updating my friends. Well, no, you're not. You're doing it from the office of the global headquarters outside of the CEO's office. And that's a perspective shift that's much different from my generation to their generation. And some think that we have to be very delicate with. In the corporate world, when we hire younger people, and having many generations at work together is difficult, especially when it comes to social media.
What would you say, as consulting in the Fortune 500 companies, because I always like to know like how things get made. What's like the top, from an HR perspective, what's like the top issues that Fortune 500 companies are dealing with now?
I can't really speak to that, to be honest with you. I spent my HR career in talent, so I was really focused on that piece of it, but I left the corporate world in 2011. And now my HR consulting is very much specialized and geared towards teaching hiring managers and large companies how to hire and how to interview. And that, I think, is kind of a full circle moment back to the beginning of our conversation, which is really where I talk to a lot of CEOs and business leaders about this complicated relationship that we have with work. And that is showing up in people coming unprepared for interviews. I had a session with a prospective client to teach their hiring managers how to interview, and they told me that they had a Zoom with a candidate, and this was for a fairly high-level position, who was eating chips in the job interview and wearing a T-shirt. So we have these very strange levels of expectations that are changing so rapidly because of COVID. And then pre-COVID, actually, the week before COVID shut everything down in 2020, I wrote an opinion piece, an article on how we have a shortage of top talent in this country. So for executive positions or high-level positions, we don't have that many. And COVID just exacerbated this. And you'll find this fascinating, right? So what COVID did to the real estate market is what it did to the talent market. So there aren't as many employees now, job seekers, as we do have positions. And then there's this misalignment. And then we have a misalignment in expectations. And so we're really going through a talent crisis in the way that we went through a real estate crisis. And that boom in 2020 when there were so many people looking for houses because the rates were so great, but there wasn't enough inventory. Well, the same thing's happening in talent. But then add on top of that, we have this weird expectation of not ever having to go back to the office in person and only wanting certain things. And there's a misalignment, right? Corporate executives want this, employees want this, and we're all over the place. Different industries want different things, and social media has these expectations. And I do think it's going to take some years to reach that equilibrium that we were talking about.
I think of Mark Anderson. I saw a post. He's a venture capitalist, and he was saying, as far as founders, but I think that it applies to like the CEO and executive level. So he's like, super smart, energetic, but then also like the courage part. And he was saying, so to the people under you, it has to seem that, you're basically getting punched in the face every day, right? and to the outside, right, you just have to show that nothing's happening, right? Like whack, whack, whack. And I don't just think it just applies to the founder. It applies to that level of C-suite. And to your point, I think less people want to do that, right? They're realizing from COVID, I think, just how short life is. They're like, what do I got to deal with this crap for? What do I got to do this, right? I want to be a part of something. I want to be a meaning, purpose. Just sit around and some jerk is sitting there bossing me around. I don't want to do that. I think that's the awareness of where we are now. It seems like,
Well, I think social media has a major disservice to making things look a lot easier than they are. Things have changed so dramatically with video content, Reels, TikTok, all of that. I get it all the time. So I have almost 2 million followers between Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. And I think I hear it and I read it in the comments quite frequently that people think that this is easy and it's a breeze. And if you spend a couple days in the shoes of the average influencer, the hateful comments, the mean things that people say, the horrible emails, the death threats, the inappropriate pictures, it's pretty wild. And to your point, the abuse that you have to take to be any level of success, it has changed very dramatically over the last 20, 30, 40 years, right? I saw an amazing article the other day that said King James in his lifetime at the most had ever spoken to 250 people. There's something strange in your brain that I have a video that has almost 40 million views, right? The level of exposure that the average person can have on social media, it's mind-boggling compared to what humans have evolved, right? We have never evolved to be able to talk to this many people, to see this, to have this much input on how we look, how we talk, what we say. It's unbelievable. It's like drinking from a fire hose, when you're on social media. I thousands and thousands of comments and emails and messages. And for me, luckily, a lot of it is good, but a great majority can be really bad. And I didn't grow up with social media, so I feel like I have a very, healthy relationship with it. Like, I really don't care what people say or the trolls, but, it's quite a lot to parse through most of the time.
Yeah, I think there's an underlying, which people do not see, must be tremendous anxiety that's potential there. Like even if you get there, so it's like nothing, then something hits, then nothing, or hard work, and then right. And it's not, I think of that message. It's not what people think. It's never what people think. You have to make sure in that self-awareness that you're coming from that place. And it's not a need of validation or anything like that. It's that I truly want to help, and this is a way that I'm going to. And that's where I think it is. But I also want to say congratulations on your book, a best-selling book, Interviewology, The New Science of Interviewing. What would you say a message to the audience of, like, again, that kind of key takeaway, one or two key takeaways from the book that really resonate with you overall?
Well, we covered some of it, which is, I think, the most important way to interview better, and why I've created this platform and wrote this book and created this interview style assessment is to help people better understand who they are. If someone reads my book, that's my greatest hope, is that they leave thinking, having a better understanding of who they are, how they present themselves. I never tell anyone to pretend to be something that they're not or memorize the perfect answers. I want to inspire people by telling my personal story. So I weave my personal story in the book, and I tell stories of clients, and I give examples and anecdotes of situations that other clients were in interviews to inspire you to understand what your story is. How do you speak about yourself with confidence? How do you own your story? For a very long time, it was hard for me to own my own story. I moved out at 15. I escaped a really abusive stepfather. I put myself through high school, and I got myself into an Ivy League school. And I really believe that it was a turning point in my life and my career when I started to own that story. And I hope that everyone can own their own story, and that's where real confidence comes from.
I resonate with that. I definitely appreciate that. So, Anna, what's something that comes to the top of your mind that you're deeply grateful for?
Oh, my children. I'm deeply grateful, and congratulations for you having a baby.
Thank you.
I actually started the research for my book and creating this as an idea, simultaneously writing my book. These projects ran in parallel. So having children and writing a book and a personality assessment and building this platform sort of all at the same time. I joke with my children that my book is my third child. And the way that parenting opens you up and teaches you how to be curious and open-minded and more loving, in the same way my research taught me the same thing. Ultimately, I am a more curious, open-minded person now that I understand interview styles, now that I understand that we don't all do this the same way. You know, when I was young and cocky, I thought, you know, there's one great way to do it. It's my way, do it my way, or you're not going to be great at this. And then, you know, I became a parent and I started collecting all this research. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for my children for so many reasons, but that's one of them, right? They break you open. They make you more open-minded. And when you love something outside of yourself, and it doesn't have to be a child, it could be a dog, it could be your work or whatever, it brings out the best in you.
Yeah, I always think about like that 3 a.m. sleepless after weeks when the baby's up and you're just sitting there. No choice because the baby needs you. And that's the story, right? It's like that. It's like that's the story. What's something about you that people don't know?
Well, I've been on social media for 2 years. Most of what I do is very professional, but I do sometimes tell a bit of my story. My book has a whole lot of my story in it. So that's a long answer to, I'm not sure there's a lot that people don't know about me. Yeah, I am pretty direct and I am pretty straightforward. And I do this because I want to teach people how to nail an interview because I really want people to thrive and get better jobs and make more money. I think it might be disappointing for people to know that I am the same in person as I am on like in a meeting or in camera. Like I am who I am. I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think there's a whole lot that people don't know about me.
I think getting to a place of what's inside and what's outside being the same is a tremendous feat. So congratulations.
For sure. It's been, you know, a long process, right? I find I really prioritize integrity. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's incredibly important to live a life of congruency. You know, I practice what I preach. I do what I say. I really believe these things. And I also think that that's why, you know, what I do, why I'm successful is because it's not a gimmick. I'm not doing it for money. I truly want to help people. So that's the truth.
That is exactly how it works. It doesn't work any other way. And you have to get a lot of long, windy roads to get there. But that's what it is.
Yeah, I live and die by the motto, you know, what is it? The love you take is equal to the love you make. Mm. And kind of going back to a little bit of what we were talking about with social media, as much as, you know, that there's negatives, there's a huge upside and there's so many positives. And for the 10 negative comments or weird emails that I get 100 amazing, thank you so much. I would have never been inspired to update my resume, or I just negotiated my job and I used your tips and I got 30 grand more. Where can I send you money? Like people try to send me money and I'm like, no. You take that money and go put it in your kid's college savings fund. This is enough for me. Like I didn't do it. I just helped you or I inspired you, but you did it. You did the thing. And that is where it's priceless to me. That's the true reward behind what I do.
Agreed. And it's really been amazing. Thank you, Anna. How can people get your book and follow you on social?
My book is available wherever books are sold. Obviously, you can go to Amazon or wherever. And you can come to my website, Interviewology.com, to take our interview style assessment and receive a 40-page customized workbook that gives you all the tips on how to interview. And if you just want some free tips, you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever. I'm available where all your social medias are. I post the same video everywhere. So follow me, come to my website, and you can get the book wherever books are sold.
Thank you so much, Anna. Really. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This was fun.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Anna. Next week, I'll chat with Brooke Schnittman. Brooke is an expert in the field of ADHD management and support. With over 2 decades of experience, Brooke has worked closely with thousands of individuals with ADHD, guiding them towards personal and professional success. She's also the founder of Coaching with Brooke, a groundbreaking organization that has rapidly become a leading global authority in the field of ADHD coaching. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again next week.